Next up, here on the Knicks Film School pregame show, with the Knicks headed up to Boston for a matchup during Rivalry Week against the Boston Celtics. Who better than to reach out to friend of the pod, the man who brought the world's attention, brought to the attention of the world, I should say, the 1-800-MACRY videos. If you don't know, just look it up on YouTube. And the Knicks Film School faithful, I'm sure, will enjoy those videos.
He covers responsible.
Yes, you are responsible. So I knew about them, but the world did not know about them. And then you brought them to everybody's attention. And this conversation will bring it to more people's attention, which I digress. He covers the NBA, specifically the Boston Celtics for Celtics blog and Heavy on Sports. He also has a podcast, Vitamin C's, by the way, brilliant title for the podcast. I've mentioned to people who have brilliant podcast titles, like I appreciate when you understand the assignment, and that is a brilliant title. Adam Taylor, welcome back to the Knicks Film School.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Sorry, Macri, I didn't realize I was the one that started that in time.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize. More people should see it. Those views should be up there with the most watched views on YouTube.
They are like feel good, like little moments, right? Like if I'm down, I'm like, let me just go watch Macri trying to sell like damage insurance.
Yes. And now he's trying to convince us that, the Knicks have although they do have a top 10 net rating, and it's all because of the head coach, which is a conversation for another day. But as far as the Celtics are concerned, Adam, I come to you to talk about this team that the Knicks are about to play, and they have the best record in the NBA. I'm curious how the vibes are, because we were having a Patreon town hall last night, and we were talking about how like other teams are able to rest players, and the Knicks are not afforded that situation because every game matters. They're trying to win as many games as possible. They're trying to get as high a playoff seed as possible. And the Celtics, at least from afar, it seems like, all right, we know this team is great. They're the defending Eastern Conference champions. At their best, I put them with a chance to win it all with anybody. So is it like, are you able to enjoy the fact that this team might be headed for 60 games in a 1 seed, or does the season start, mid-April?
No, you definitely enjoy it, because if you've been covering this team since they drafted Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and let me close this blind so you can get rid of that glare a little bit. And
my man's a producer. He gets it. I appreciate it.
No, I mean, I've been covering this team since they blew it up with the trade to Brooklyn when they got rid of Pierce and Garnett and stuff. So coming from where they were, and then you had the whole Kyrie Irving saga shortly after they moved on from Isaiah Thomas, and they've been in bad spots, even though they've had talent. It hasn't gelled that well. And I say this, and everyone's going to be like, well, you've had multiple conference finals runs and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but there's been a lot of bumps along the road. So I'm enjoying every game. As far as I'm concerned, winning the East in terms of finishing first is an achievement in itself. It's a confidence building kind of, we're coming in as reigning champions of the Eastern Conference. We've just finished first in the seeding again. Now we feel confident making that run in the postseason. So for me, the season started on opening night. Yeah, I'm not about this. It starts in the postseason, because then I'm wasting my time watching the other 82 games.
Good to hear. Not that I'd have that much experience with this, because the Knicks have, at least since in my adult life, have had one successful season like this, where you could argue the season didn't start until the playoffs, and that was 2012-13 when they won 54 games and then, beat the Celtics in the first round and then lost to the Pacers. But I do understand that there is still a rivalry between the Knicks and the Celtics. I wonder how strong it is. Like, we're in the middle of rivalry week with the NBA, and I'll be completely honest, I found about it midway through rivalry week, that they had coined this specific 7 days as, we're going to put the rivals against each other. And, the Knicks, Celtics, New York, Boston, that makes sense. Do you, and I don't want you to have to speak for all Celtics fans, but I'm curious your perspective on this. Where are the Knicks on your radar? I would imagine the Heat have a bigger rivalry with the Celtics. I'd imagine there are some other teams that the Celtics fans would look at before the Knicks, potentially even the other team in New York that plays in Brooklyn.
Yeah, that rivalry is more of a Kyrie Irving rivalry, though.
Gotcha.
I think I have a different outlook on this compared to most people, just because I'm not from the States. So for me, growing up around like soccer fans, your rivalries are the teams that are closest to you geographically, right? So you have your other rivalries like your like Miami, like Boston Lakers. It's, hey, you're really good at winning championships. They're really good at winning championships. There's a rivalry there because you want to be the team that wins the most championships. Mm-hmm. But then, like, you know, New York and Boston geographically are incredibly close to each other. And that to me builds a rivalry because you're more likely, like, rivalries to me are fan based. So you're more likely to cross paths with a New York fan in Boston than you are to cross paths with, I don't know, a Trailblazers fan in Boston, right? And that can lead to some kind of like back and forth, obviously, hopefully good natured, and it doesn't evolve into any derogatory, but you know how things go. So for me,
depends on the alcohol intake, Adam.
It does, and the people involved. But for me, that's a rivalry. I think New York are one of the bigger rivals. I still see them as the biggest sleeping giant in the NBA. And for that reason, I've always keeping an eye on New York because, you know, that home court advantage, should you ever get it, or those home court games in a 7-game series are going to be incredibly difficult to navigate from an emotional standpoint and be able to hear people shouting out plays on the court. So for me, yeah, it's still a rivalry. I wouldn't say it's a heated one, but it definitely exists.
Yeah, I still get up for the Celtics. I think I don't have the hatred, I guess, that I have for the Heat
or the Hawks.
At this point, the Hawks. The funny thing about the Hawks is, like, because the ceiling for both of those teams is like the second round. I know Trae Young made it and the Hawks made it to the conference finals 2 years ago. I chuck a lot of that up to the fact that so much went wrong with the Sixers, then so much went right with the Hawks. So as a result, it's like we're fighting it out in the middle, which I don't know, doesn't, like, my rivalries that I grew up with were like going against Reggie Miller to go to the finals, going against the Heat to go to like further in the playoffs. And like there was legit fights that broke out in those playoff series too, which add to it. But yeah, New York, Boston, as you mentioned, will always be a thing. And that's like multi-sport, whether it be obviously the Yankees, Red Sox, even the Mets, Red Sox, for those that remember 86. And it's stopped being so one-sided recently because Brady left, but Patriots, Jets and Patriots, Giants will always be a thing. And I'm excited to see what the Celtics look like because last time the Knicks played them was very early in the season. The Celtics hit a ton of threes. And then they went on to be what they've been the last couple of months, which is one of the best teams in the NBA. From an outsider's perspective, I see a well-oiled machine with one stretch that was like kind of questionable where they came back down to earth that this wasn't going to be a 70-win team, but still a team that, like, okay, I get what they do. It's a lot of wings. It's a lot of elite shooting. You have two really great players in Tatum and Brown, and then you have multiple complementary pieces. Like, show me where the holes are, Adam. What is the concern if you're a Celtics fan as far as this team is concerned?
I'm always concerned about their transition defense. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, and I think they've definitely shored that up. I think they've improved there dramatically over the last few months. But if you can make the Celtics run back on defense consistently, they're going to slowly wear down. And they play such a high tempo offense that making them have to defend at a high tempo too will eventually wear them out a little bit. And then shots might start to front rim out, or cuts might not become as prevalent. Maybe guys are taking a possession or two off just to get the wind back under them, back into them. So transition defense for me is one. I do think that they can be bullied a little bit on the offensive glass. Like if you want to go and play a bruising game of looking for second chance points and then finding ways to attack from the post, there's a way there. There's a chance, especially earlier in the season where they were really struggling. Obviously, they've gone back to that double big lineup with Al Horford and Robert Williams, and that's resolved a bunch of problems because most people don't get that second chance opportunity when the shot's being punted into the stands from Rob. But that would be another area I'd be like, hey, if we can get someone pounding that offensive glass, we might be able to give ourselves a good opportunity. And besides that, you're just going to find it really tough. I mean, this team's one of the best defensive teams in the league right now. Their perimeter defense does a great job of funneling ball handlers towards shot blockers. And they also do a great job of putting Robert Williams on, and it's horrible to say it like this, right? But one of the worst shooters. So whoever you try and hide in the corner on offense, Rob Williams is going to guard him, knowing that he can cheat off him all day and then rotate over and be that weak side shot blocker. Because if you're kicking out to a 25%, 28% 3-point shooter, you'll live with them taking those open jumpers in exchange for taking away that rim run or that drive from an Emmanuel Quickly or a Barrett or a Brunson. So they do a really good job of kind of playing possum a little bit and letting you get towards the rim before really closing that space and then making you make a decision. But yeah, offensive glass and transition are going to be the two places that I would look for.
Which is funny because while the Knicks don't run a ton, their second unit, when Quickly comes in, does a little more. They just flat out don't run as much as they used to, especially when they had the Derrick Rose, Quickly, Alec Burks, Obi Toppin lineup cooking the last 2 seasons. And their biggest strength has been the offensive glass. And it's because Mitchell Robinson has been a beast. Unfortunately, Mr. Robinson broke his hand last week and will miss this game against Boston. And it'll be curious to see an area that's now become a concern, which is not just the offensive glass, but the defensive glass. And as great as Julius Randle's been, I'll be honest, I'm a little worried. That player you put in the corner because he's your weakest shooter, I'm not like it's either RJ or Quentin Grimes, or honestly at this point, Julius. So I think Rob Williams will probably just be more matched up with either Jericho Sims or Hartenstein in a dunker spot. But I'm curious to see how they match up. I know it really was just a showcase of great 3-point shooting the last time that they played, but the Knicks will play somewhat a good amount of drop coverage against this team, and it'll be curious to see how the Celtics take advantage of that. I'm trying to talk about to ease my way into the coaching conversation, because like obviously some stuff happened with the Celtics coaching staff before the season, right before the season, and it's been interesting to see that the Celtics haven't skipped a beat. From what you're hearing, and I guess what have you covered the team this year, what has been the conversation around Joe Mazzulla that, has it just kind of been like night and day, that it went from Udoka to him and nothing was different? Like what differences have you seen in their coaching styles? What's the season been like with him as the coach?
Yeah, I think Udoka was definitely more of a defensive minded coach, and that showed in the product that they put on the floor from January through to the finals last season. Mazzulla is I wouldn't say smarter, but he's a far more creative offensive mind. They've run a ton of different actions and they've run multiple variations of those actions. So it's really, a Spain pick and roll's coming from Boston, but you don't know whether they're going to drive off it. Someone's going to flare off that bat screen, or, they have like 4 or 5 variations and now iterate through them in a game just to keep you on your toes. Mazzulla's just been far more creative offensively, and I feel like this team was always built to be an offensive powerhouse more than a defensive powerhouse. Like Brad Stevens has done a fantastic job since taking that role in the front office of giving the coaches guys that can handle the rock, shoot, pass, and defend. And it seems like everyone there can play defense to a high level in that rotation. But when you've got Jason Tatum, you've got Jaylen Brown, you've got a big like Al Horford that's just stopped playing interior basketball and just is now sitting on the perimeter shooting like a career best 3-point percentage. You want to lean into that offense more. In terms of like personality wise, I think both of them hold this team accountable. Joe Mazzulla just seems a little bit more confrontational. Like I've seen him like chew out a few reporters here and there when a dumb question's been asked, and Udoka didn't. Udoka was a bit more reserved there. He would just answer them or just kind of shut you down. Joe would just be like, "What are you on about? I've already answered this." So me personally, I'm trying not to ask Joe Mazzulla any questions when I'm there, obviously. But yeah, I think that Joe's been a really good coach. He's been with the team for a while. He was there. He was an assistant under Brad Stevens. He was an assistant under Udoka. He knew the team. There was a lot of talk last season how putting Rob in that Roma role on that weaker shooter was actually part of Mazzulla's brainchild, and it was his idea to implement that, and that's what revolutionized Boston's defense last year. And that was, I mean, that's rumors, but I've heard it from multiple people now that not Joe Mazzulla implemented that. He was the one that recommended doing that. So he comes with a bit of like coaching pedigree. I like him. I think he's done a great job. If they decide not to retain Udoka for whatever reason, if they decide to part ways with him at the end of the suspension, it's because Mazzulla has done such a good job that it's been so seamless. Why would you want to go back and then start rehashing all of the drama that came with it? And it's just not fair on the team. It's not fair on the coaches. So I'm a big fan of John Mazzulla.
What do you think has to happen for him to be retained and they let go of Udoka? Like how much success
I personally feel like that's already going to happen. I feel like
that's in the cards anyway. Gotcha.
I mean, my outlook on it is they haven't fired Udoka yet because there's probably some legal things that they need to deal with. Maybe there's some, I don't know. I'm not privy to any information there, but I feel like, for me, it doesn't make sense to bring him back after a year of being away. And I think Mazzulla's put himself in the window to be like, hey, I can do this. You know, we're one of the best teams in the league. Since I took over, I revolutionized the offense. For me, it's just a matter of if. No, it's a matter of when, not if.
Okay. It's interesting because I mean, look, there was that talk when Steve Nash got fired, that like the next up was going to be Udoka, and that there's going to be some kind of thing worked out that somehow the Nets were going to back their way into him as the head coach. That obviously has changed, and Jacques Vaughn is arguably the runner-up, if not the front runner for Coach of the Year with Joe Mazzulla. But I'm curious to see how, again, from afar, how that plays out. And it's been curious to see because the conversation about Thibodeau, and I've had it with a couple other people that cover other teams, when like it just seems like every fan base has something to complain about with their coach, regardless of how successful from the outside it seems the team is doing. Have you noticed any of that with the
Joe Mazzulla doesn't call timeouts ever.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, ever. He will happily tell you, like, I don't believe in timeouts. He'll take the ones that he's mandated to take, like, you know, your ad break timeouts or like game enforce, but he's not calling a timeout at all. Like, he just does. It's like it's against his belief in basketball. He'd rather you play through it and figure it out. And that's a huge sticking point with a lot of Celtics fans. He didn't call one against Miami the other day, down the final stretch. He just let them play it out. Ended up in a bad pass from Tatum, you know, and obviously you're not advancing the ball during those late game situations by calling that timeout. It's a huge issue for Celtics fans right now. But it's working because they're top of the Eastern Conference. So, yeah, I'd like to see some more timeouts called, but I also like that fact that the game flows more and people are in better rhythm because of it. So there's pros and cons, but that's what the Celtics fans' problem is at the moment.
I think that's the thing that it always comes back to, is then you look at the results and it's like, yes, you have your quibbles and you have your complaints about a head coach. But again, in your case, if you're the best team record-wise in the league and you know, he's clearly doing something right. And I think that's the push and pull of Knicks fans right now, where it's like, okay, do I have my quibbles with Thibodeau? Yes. But, you know, overall, I can't see the season as a failure and I can't say he's doing a poor job. I mean, just ask you from an outsider perspective, because I've recently gotten this from other people that are outside the Knicks bubble, that, you know, the Knicks actually seem like they're actually building something. They're stable for the first time in a while. From your perspective, how do you view the Knicks and how their season has gone so far?
I mean, if you go back to any appearance I've made on this show, I've spoke glowingly of New York. Just because I like young teams with high upside. I think you guys have been good. I think I've watched probably 6 or 8 games of the Knicks this year. It's not a team I've really kept tabs on. Like, oh, I need to watch every game they play. But from what I've seen, you guys, you know, you get developments there. I know that I spoke to Macri the other day and he was like, RJ Barrett's defense has regressed to a point where it's just a non-factor. But there's still talent there in terms of offense. I like the Hartenstein pickup. I know it's not really working for you guys right now. Does speak to Tibbs's offense.
A little bit.
I mean, one of the biggest takeaways I've taken from the last 18 months when I have watched the Knicks is you could really use an offensive-minded assistant coach that can just kind of take over that offense and revolutionize it to start using the talent you do have. But I think you guys are a tough team, man. You play gritty basketball. There's a lot of drives, a lot of rim pressure, and there's some real good talent there. Obi Toppin's another guy I don't feel is being utilized the way he should be. I'd like to, but Julius Randle is Julius Randle at this point. I feel it's crazy when your entire season rests on the shoulders of a guy that can play really well or really bad, just depending on which way the wind's blowing. And I feel like with the amount of draft stock you guys have and the amount of moves that you've made to try and improve this roster, the fact that everything still rests on what mood Julius Randle's in, that leaves some concerns for me. But look, if the Sacramento Kings can figure it out in just one major trade, then I'm sure you guys can do that too.
And that's why the thing about this year that I'm taking and like choosing to take as a positive is where they were with Julius at the end of last season. And look, we'll see how the All-Star selections go. I think he could make it. I think he very easily couldn't because of how stacked the Eastern Conference has been this year. But he's no longer a negative asset that you're trading for a ham sandwich. Now you can actually use him if you did want to explore the upgrading the power forward position. You can do it that way with Julius Randle as the centerpiece. And that wasn't the case when they were in the summer of Donovan Mitchell this summer. It was almost like we're trading for the first star. And now in this case, you'd be already having a borderline star with Jalen Brunson and potentially upgrading the other star you have with Julius Randle. That's not a problem Celtics fans have because Jason Tatum is a surefire star, a superstar, an MVP candidate, and Jaylen Brown. Just seeing his box scores and the times I've watched the Celtics to see his game evolve have been impressive to see. The only real question I have as far as they're concerned is like the long-term plan with them. And look, this is like unfair to ask because like we're in the now, we're playing for this season's championship, but like it's these two guys. These are our guys. These are the Celtics core and cornerstones for like the next decade, right? Like that's how Celtics fans view this, that we're going to grow with these two going forward.
Yeah. The problem is the roster's getting expensive very fast. They've got to make a decision on Grant Williams, who's a restricted free agent this summer. From the reports that I read, they offered him $14 million average annual value before the season. And that was kind of a line in the sand. And Grant was like, no, I feel like I'm worth closer to 20. The Celtics were like, no, you're not. And then he's come out this year and has proved, yes, I am. I'm worth that 18, 19 million a year. So assuming a team offers him that and Boston matches, now they have to turn their attention to Jaylen Brown being an unrestricted free agent next season. So all the Celtics fans are hoping for right now is he can make an all-NBA team or he can make an all-defensive team and kind of become Supermax eligible because nobody yet has turned down a Supermax deal.
Right.
If he does hit unrestricted free agency, there's a chance. There's always a chance, right, that you lose him for nothing. And then everything has to change. You have to do you tear it down and try and rebuild around Tatum? How do you try and find that second star? Is there already somebody on the roster that you can elevate that can develop into that? There's going to be a whole bunch of questions. And Atlanta's obviously the biggest risk of taking him away because he's innate. Like he grew up in Atlanta. His family are there. His friends are there. There's going to be a few other teams that might try and poach him too. So for Celtics fans at the moment, I think as far like the even-keeled ones, the ones that look at things a bit more holistically, because obviously diehards look at it from why would you leave? We're a little bit concerned that there's a chance that Jaylen could leave next year, but we also know that at present, there isn't many better situations you can find yourself in. Like you're on a contending team that's full of depth, 1 through 8, 1 through 9, a really good front office that make intelligent moves and they don't overbuy or oversell in terms of draft assets. But again, he might feel like he needs to be the first option on a team and he doesn't want to keep playing in Jason Tatum's shadow. Not saying he is. I mean, Jaylen Brown's shining in his own way every game. But if he wants to be that guy, then that's not going to happen in Boston. And that could be a reason why he, decides to test free agency next year.
How much damage did the Durant talks this summer do, if at all?
It was they're going to say nothing, right? They're going to tell you it didn't matter. But that wasn't the first time. He was floated in the Anthony Davis trade rumors before the AD went to LA. Then he was floated with Kawhi when Kawhi was with the Spurs. Every time a big star becomes available, it's always Jaylen Brown that's going to get floated because you're not going to trade Jason Tatum. And this is where the being in that shadow comes in, right? It's not that you're not a good player. It's just you're not as good as Jason Tatum in terms of your overall skill set. Which is horrible to say because I think JB is an all-NBA level guy. I think he's one of the best finishers in the game, one of the best scoring guys in the league. But I think that definitely, you'd feel some type of way, right? Like once bitten, twice shy, third time, you're like, okay, so whenever this happens, there's a chance that I'm on that trade block.
It's especially when you just went to the finals and you just eliminated Kevin Durant. Now, understanding, I'm sure, I'd hope there's some self-awareness that it's Kevin Durant, but even then, the motivation of an athlete and the ego of an athlete, even then, you're like, I don't care if it's Kevin Durant. I was in the trenches with you guys when we went to the finals. So,
and then 3 weeks later, Tatum's in LA working out with Kevin Durant.
There you go.
But, and I'm sure those guys spoke about it, and I'm not trying to say there was anything sinister there. I believe that was already a pre-planned workout, and those two guys get on really well from their time in Team USA. But in terms of narrative, if we want to look at it from a narrative perspective, yeah, of course you're going to feel some type of way. So, Jaylen Brown's my biggest concern in the next 18 months at the moment, barring any major injuries, touch wood. I think he holds the keys to a sustained period of dominance versus a 2-year window.
Interesting. Well, part of that 2-year window is, obviously the Jaylen Brown thing will take care of itself. I'd be lying if that man's name hasn't come up in conversation when Knicks fans have talked about who might be available with cap space to add the next couple of years. That 2-year window, though, the Celtics have a chance to win a title, I think, in both of those years. They may look to add, and this is going to be my last question, as far as improving the roster is concerned. Who are you looking for? What type of player? If there's one player in particular that you're looking for the Celtics to get, who would it be?
For me personally, I'm just find a wing that can handle the ball a little bit, be like a tertiary playmaker off the bench and just hit shots. I'm not asking you to be a volume shooter. I'm asking you to be judicial with your shot selection and take good, high quality shots. A lot of Celtics fans, a lot of them, believe Cam Reddish is that guy.
It's amazing. I was thinking his name, and then you said it, and I was like, there's no way that Cam Reddish would actually be that guy.
Me personally does not believe that Cam Reddish is that guy.
Neither do I. There is a hive that will watch and listen to this episode, though, that will say, see, vindicated. The Celtics want Cam Reddish. He'd be perfect for that.
You see, for me, my outlook on it is, and this is no knock on Cam Reddish, I think that there's talent there. But for me personally, when you're a contending team, you do not take a swing on a reclamation project. That's not where Boston are in their kind of cycle right now. I could see Cam Reddish being a good idea for the Indiana Pacers, but they've already got their wing rotation. The Spurs could be anyone rebuilding that can give him the opportunity, because he's been in bad spots, right? Mm-hmm. He's in Atlanta. They're not great with player development. You can say Trae Young, but he was a surefire thing. Maybe DeAndre Hunter, but overall, their talent evaluation and talent development is quite bad. So then he has a hard time there. And we can point at Kevin Huerter as a reason why as well. You see Kevin Huerter's been misused in Atlanta, goes to Sacramento, and the dude's all of a sudden a playmaking extraordinaire. So you're in Atlanta, it doesn't work. You go to New York. From an outside perspective, it felt like Tibbs didn't want him from the get-go. He wasn't a Tibbs acquisition. And he's kind of been punished for that, kind of unfairly from the outside of things. But obviously, does, like, you know, if you're not playing, it's not, if the Knicks have had bad stretches, you guys have bounced back and really run off some good stretches. But during the bad stretches, if his number's not being called, part of that's due to talent or personality or whatever it may be. No, thank you. I would much rather, I mean, I was on the bring in Carmelo Anthony train for a long time during the offseason. I was like, he'd be perfect. Just a guy that can come off the bench and can give you 5 to 8 minutes and 4 to 6 points a night with a couple of rebounds. It's exactly what they need. And he played a big role for the Lakers last year. And if you look at the drop-off kind of coincided with the fact that he was playing ridiculous minutes at a really old age, and eventually his body was just like, dude, I can't sustain this. I think that he would have been a good idea. I still do, personally. I think he could be a good option. You can, other than that, a lot of people want a big man, and I'm just like, I don't see the need for an additional big man. But if I did, I'd want Hartenstein.
I know I said at the beginning that I don't, that the rivalry with the Celtics, like, I get up for it, but it's not as much of a rivalry. I still, as a lifelong Melo stan, like he's been in my life the entire time. As somebody who has always been an admirer of Carmelo Anthony, back to Syracuse, to see him in a finals run with the Celtics would lead to so many mixed emotions, I gotta say.
But wouldn't it be nice to see him finally win a ring?
It would be. Having said that, with the Celtics, so like, there's some history there. I'm a Jets fan. Darrelle Revis is one of the greatest players to wear a Jets uniform. He won the Super Bowl with the Patriots. You know, like, Red Sox fans have this with a couple of guys where Wade Boggs finally won the World Series. Roger Clemens finally won the World Series. Those are Red Sox legends. They won them with the Yankees, you know? So while you're happy for the guy personally, the fan in you is like, dang, you had to win it with that uniform.
With that team. Yeah, you know? I get that.
So
I get that.
And look, as far as the Cam thing is concerned, I'll just go out and say he was like solid for the first 20-ish games of the season. Quentin Grimes kind of emerged as the clear upgrade as a starting 2-guard or 3-guard, whatever he's playing against RJ. He's a better point of attack defender. And you kind of need that in a lineup, as John said, where RJ's become this version of himself on defense. And Jalen Brunson is kind of a liability on the defensive end, no matter how hard he tries. And so Cam then had to settle for being a backup, which he slowly saw his minutes start to be Thibodeau bench minutes. And then there's this one game in Dallas that he just was the worst player on the court. And he got benched after that. And the Knicks are 16-10 since that stretch. So you go to the results and say, well, they're winning without him. They've turned their season around without him. I don't think it's a direct like cause and effect as a result, but at least that's the reasoning why he hasn't been put back into the rotation. I think your assumption that this wasn't somebody he wanted in the first place is fair. And I think there is a large, very vocal contingent of Knicks fans that are like, when Cam goes elsewhere and performs and doesn't have the wall of Thibodeau in front of him from playing, then we'll eventually decide who's right. And, you know, if that's what the Celtics, I'd be curious to see what a team that just like flourishes with wings, you know, how they utilize him. But I guess we'll see. It's just so amazing that you said Cam Reddish, and that's the name that came out of your mouth.
There's a lot of people that believe Cam Reddish is the answer at that wing spot. Man. I just think that I'd much rather have somebody that is a veteran that understands their role, that understands, hey, you're not going to get consistent minutes. You're not going to be playing every game. And there will be a time when Jason Tatum sits out or Jaylen Brown that you're thrust into that starting lineup and you're expected to perform. And I just don't think Cam Reddish has the experience or is developed enough to be that guy.
Could Evan Fournier be that guy? I know that you've already had your run-in with Evan Fournier. No, that's a no. Okay.
I don't think Evan Fournier can be a guy.
Look, something happened. I know there are also Knicks fans that are like, why was he so great in FIBA over the summer and then he came back and was terrible with the Knicks? And it's like, actually, there has been a decline in his his athletic ability. It seems he's like a step slower on offense, a step slower on defense. Whereas last year he set the Knicks record for 3-pointers made. This season, like there's just no consistency,
and there's no defense there, right? I just don't think he's a defensive guy. And if you want to play consistently for the Celtics, you have to be two-way. You have to be a two-way player. They even allow Peyton Pritchard to guard bigs. They do what's called veer-back switching, where you switch pick and roll. You have the small guy go down and kind of get underneath the big. So when the big tries to come up for the ball, he's jumping over your back and it's a foul. And Pritchard holds his own against 6'10", 6'11" guys. Pritchard's 6'1", 6. I'm taller than Peyton Pritchard. And he's out there like guarding his yard against these guys. And Evan Fournier just couldn't do that for Boston, unfortunately. So, and I don't believe Cam Reddish could either. I don't believe Cam Reddish is at that point where he's locked in like that.
Again, there's a 20-ish game sample size where I was like, okay, this is... Like I feel like Cam hype has been vindicated a bit. Like Cam is much more playable than I was led to believe by this head coach last year. And then you just slowly started to see. I mean, like, and this is probably the biggest reason. We'll wrap up with this, that like him on a contender doesn't make sense, is because like the effort just wasn't there. And you can't gamble with playoff success on someone who you have effort questions. And look, I can imagine seeing your role disappear. Seeing your minutes disappear will just mentally wear on you, and you're like, why am I trying my hardest for this team? That's like, I went from playing 30 to 20 to 15 now to like 7 in the first half against the Mavericks. So it's a very human response. I'm also like, I'm someone that's rooting for Cam, like you said, to go to a team that's playing for nothing this year. I want to see what Cam in a role where there's no expectations except to like make something of yourself is actually going to do. But
the Celtics fans are going through that right now. They've got Aaron Nesmith over in Indiana that's really figuring things out for them. And then they've got Romeo Langford in San Antonio that's starting to show flashes of an offensive game. And obviously Romeo is a better defender, so he's going to see the floor more consistently. But both of those guys are starting to prove that they're NBA level talents. And it was just never going to happen in Boston playing limited roles behind Jason and Jalen. And that I use those two guys as the example of why you do not trade for Cam Reddish, because they had to move on from two young guys because they weren't developing them. They didn't have the opportunity that they needed. Why would you bring in Cam and be the third bad spot for him, which could potentially end his time in the NBA?
Yeah.
You want to see him go to a Utah or a Detroit or a team like that where he's going to be allowed to play and flourish.
That example you just used is why there's also Knicks fans that want to see Obi Toppin get traded, just to see how right they were that Obi deserves to be playing a ton of minutes. And,
this is what I'm saying. He's not being utilized right.
It's just exactly. It's not being utilized right. And it's like, it's not going to happen here. Not while Julius Randle's still on the roster. Not while Tom Thibodeau's still the head coach and refuses to play like him and Randle together for more than a couple minutes in an emergency situation. It's like rim protection. I need a true center for 48 minutes. And like, that's what you're going to see. And that's why, I think it is fair to point out that just in certain places, it was never going to work. And that doesn't mean if they go someplace else that it's on the original place where it failed. It just, certain teams are able to, like, how are Chicago fans feeling about marketing right now?
I know, and like you go and look, but fit and look, opportunity and fit are two things that are very underrepresented in these discussions. Like when you look at if a player goes from team A to team B and thrives, it's because the players around him fit his skill style better. The coach is using him in a completely different system that maximizes his potential. And it is what it is. And sometimes that's why players need to move, and that's why you need to move on from them. Hartenstein's on the opposite end of that right now. He came from a team that lent into all of his upside and minimized his downside to a team that's like, no, you play our way. And it's just not working out right now. And it's a tough discussion, but it's one that happens all throughout sports. It's not just basketball. And it's one that a lot of people kind of overlook and just be like, no, the player's trash or the coach is trash. When really it's kind of a mixture of two.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking time out. I will let people in behind the scenes. I had some stuff come up yesterday when we were supposed to record, and Adam was nice enough to agree to push to the next morning, which, because of the time difference, I believe I'm 4 hours behind you. 5 hours behind you. So for you, it's about 11 a.m., right?
Yeah.
Okay. For me, do the math, everybody. And when we started to do this pod.
Full disclosure, I was happy to start later, but
right. But when I was like awake and was like, I'm not falling back to sleep anytime soon. Let's see if it's like not 5 a.m. for Adam. Let me see if he's willing to knock this out now. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, regardless of the hour that it was. Do me a favor. Plug what you'd like to plug and tell everybody where they could find you.
Awesome. So if for any reason any of you Knicks fans want to follow Celtics content, I'm not sure if there's many of you, but if there is, you can find me over on YouTube. Just search at Adam Taylor NBA. That's where the Vitamin C show is and all the video and audio content we do. And then just follow me on social media. So Twitter and Instagram are my two primaries, and both of them are at Adam Taylor NBA as well. I'm very creative with the handle, as you can see.
As you can see, yes. As someone who also knows GMAC NBA, I'm sure,
and about 10 million other people with NBA.
With NBA, exactly. I haven't graduated to that yet, but I'll stick with the underscore score for now. Adam, thank you as always, my friend. Good to see you.
Of course, man. Thank you. Pleasure's all mine.